This is Arnab from Digital Transitions, and today I'm joined by Dave Wyble of Avian Rochester.
Hello.
Dave, do you want to tell us a little bit about, well, one, what we're going to be talking about today, which is the DT Next Generation Target V2, but also about yourself and about Avian.
Sure, thanks. Definitely thanks for having me here today. As you said, my name is Dave Wyble. I'm the president of Avian Rochester, LLC. And so we do a lot of high accuracy measurements, lots of different custom measurement apparatuses that we have downstairs to make such measurements for really anything that you can imagine. I probably measured the color of it over the years. I also am involved in a few different physical targets, like the NGT2 that Arnab just mentioned, next generation target, version 2. We're going to talk a lot about that today. I also make a transmissive microscope slide format color checker that is used for whole slide imaging in the medical field. And both of these things are available with NIST traceable calibrations if you want. Or not, we highly recommend that, of course. So for myself, I've been in color and R&D for really my whole career since the early 80s at Xerox, working on color technology for color printers and things, and color copiers. And then the middle of my career was at Rochester Institute of Technology in the Munsell Color Science Lab, where I was a staff scientist and adjunct professor, and did a lot of research there over the years and teaching. And then about almost 10 years ago now, I kind of went out on my own and started Avian Rochester LLC and began this journey of consulting and collecting instruments to take measurements with, and working with great folks like at Digital Transitions.
Awesome. Well, I got to tell you, I'm looking forward to hearing more about the NGT. You know, I've used it. I know, of course, I've seen your presentations before, but I think it's a really exciting product, specifically because of the way it's designed just for the cultural heritage community. And I think a lot of what we talk about at DT is there are a lot of general products out there. But when you're doing something at the highest level, which all of our clients are looking to do, you need to have something that's specifically designed for your application. And as you mentioned, you know, in the medical field, obviously that's super important. In the cultural heritage field, it's equally important. So why don't we hop right into it? And do you want to go ahead and show us the target and tell us a little bit about it?
So I have here the Next Generation 2 target in a nice little box, and comes in this non-woven sleeve to keep everything nice and clean. So this target had in its infancy was developed for the Library of Congress, and the requirements they had were based on their dissatisfaction with some of the markets, some of the targets that are in the market now, when they were just damaged slightly in the lab. They would have to throw them away and get them, and not only buy a new one, but have the new one remeasured, which is also not inexpensive. And so we addressed some of that. We addressed the color gamut issues that they wanted, to have the range of colors that they wanted. And then in particular, for the cultural heritage community, as a part of the research to develop the colors that we selected for this, we went out and with between my own work and the Library of Congress personnel, we measured about 1,200 different historical artifacts, documents, books, manuscripts, maps, magazines, you name it, we did it, and ended up with 1,200 measurements. And then we kind of looked at the color distribution of those. And then we ended up with, it's not going to be real clear here, but you see there's two rows here that are kind of mostly sort of yellows and tans, and then up on this side too. And those were the ones that we specifically pulled out of that database that we acquired, and we feel best represent the cultural heritage, the range of samples that are measured in the cultural heritage world community. So a few other things that we really like about this target. As I said before, the frustration was that a target can get damaged slightly and then it ends up needing to be discarded. So this target has got a top surface on it that can be cleaned. And so, lightly, we include a cleaning solution here and some cloths if you need them. And then you just kind of can lightly clean off fingerprints and dirt and dust. Dust is very easy, but even something like fingerprints, a little bit of oil, that's going to come off just fine. And furthermore, I had done many experiments to show that you can do that cleaning and you haven't changed the color values. So now you don't have to go back and remeasure the color values, which is more importantly than parts and stuff is labor, which we know labor is really expensive. And so you can avoid the labor of having to do this. And then not only do you spend the time paying a technician to make the measurements, that data has to get into a computer, has to get on all the different systems that are going to be used with this particular target. And so all of that adds up to a huge labor savings by not having to do any of that. The person in the lab, the photographer, the technician can just clean this up, put it right back into service, and know that your profiles are going to be as good as they were before.
Yeah, so that's really, really interesting. I think that the logic of kind of having a target that's inexpensive, makes sense intuitively, but looking longer term at a programmatic effort, at a larger scale, at an institution that's doing thousands of pieces of material over months or even years, having a target that you can trust to have that longevity and that accuracy makes a lot of sense. So can you tell me a little bit about the construction of the target? And in particular, I think a lot of folks will want to know, most targets are designed with the patches, exposed, which is what causes that sort of issue of degradation. So how are you able to design this particular target so that that's less of an issue, so that it can be cleaned without negatively impacting the color quality or other aspects of the target?
Okay, so I'm just going to start at the end with the color quality, right? So the most important thing with respect to that is of course, we'd like a good range, a good gamut of colors in our target. But what's more important to me than the distribution of those is back to the idea of the traceable measurements. So you've made high accuracy measurements of the patches, and that's what goes into your profile. So even if and this top coat does not affect the color in a bad way, but even if it did, what my response would be, but you're going to measure it anyway, and that's what's going to go into your file, and that's what's going to go into your profile for your camera. And so in that sense, either way, you're going to do okay. Now, with respect to the actual construction of the target, what we did was we started with a series of paints. Many of them are just plain old house paints because they get pretty chromatic when you work at it. And initially, yes, we did just try to get glossy paints. We wanted to have all the gloss be the same, but it turns out that's really, really difficult to do because the manufacturers just don't have. One manufacturer won't have the whole gamut of colors I want, and then you go to another manufacturer for additional colors, and now you've got slightly different glosses because they aren't the same paint, the same base, right? So what we ended up doing, the insight here was, well, I'm going to put the paint on a sheet of transparency stock, like a polyester office transparency type stock, and then so the paint is on that, and then we flip that over. So the paint is actually below the surface of this layer. So if we cut this apart, you'd see about, I forget, maybe about a half or a third of a millimeter thickness of that transparency stock. Then there'd be a layer of paint, then a layer of adhesive, and then onto the anodized aluminum. So that was the production method that we came up with, and that gives us a couple things, right? It gives us these nice colors that you see. It also gives us really uniform gloss, which you can't really tell here. You can get a little bit of that sort of feel right there, but since the top surface of these is all physically the same material, it's going to have the same gloss, and that's good for reasons to keep a consistent measurement and a consistent image capture across these. We don't want to have differential gloss. And the other thing we get out of putting this on a base plate of anodized aluminum, machined aluminum, is that these things are not only all uniform glossy, but they are very, very flat. And that means that you can use most of the circle in terms of your averaging, because that's what we're going to do, right? We're going to image this, we're going to average these RGBs, and that's what's going to go into your profile creation. And so as long as we've got this really flat, that gives me lots of space to take a good measurement for my camera capture.
Now you mentioned imaging and profile generation. What profiling software supports the NGT V2?
So we currently export many different files, and we export a file that has been confirmed to work in basic color input 6. You get just plain Excel type CSV files if you want to use them for your own, which is actually the format that is taken in by OpenDice. If you want to use that, it's not profiling, but that is the way to do analysis in OpenDice. And then just the basic Excel files that will let you take that data and put it wherever you want. I mean, I use a lot of MATLAB. This goes right into MATLAB fine. It's already an Excel format if that's your preferred place to work. But the idea is to get the data into everyone's hands in any format that they need. And I'd be willing to customize that as well. It's not hard. This is all done in MATLAB, and a few lines of code get you a whole new file. And if that's something that helps somebody out, then definitely let the folks at DT know, and we'll figure that out for you.
Excellent. And that's a good point. I mean, I think working with companies like Avian and with DT, we're relatively small. I mean, speaking in terms of our ability to kind of pivot and work nimbly and make individual, items and measurements as needed. So certainly if there is something that's not available or specific measurements that are needed or formatting, that's absolutely something that we can work with you on, and that Dave can work with you on, and that a variety of our vendors for the most part can. Now you did mention the measurements.
Yes.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about why individual measurements and NIST traceable measurements are important, and a little bit more about how you do that?
Sure. The first thing is, why are they important? And that's because no matter how much work we do to make each one of these targets identical from one to the next, it's not possible. Right? There's going to be very subtle variations in things that maybe are not even necessarily visible. This target looks really good, but I know, and I have plenty of data to show, that target to target, they do differ by, I won't say a lot, but they differ by enough where you could certainly see an impact in a profile. Right? You want the best data possible to go into your profile, and the way to do that is to have an individual measurement made by me or by somebody. And so just to show a little bit about the actual measurement now. So I have here an instrument. This happens to be a Konica Minolta FD7. It's pretty common out there. Many of you probably use an i1 Pro. There's a variety of different i1 Pros out there. For the discussion today, it doesn't really matter too much what they are. Now, there are geometry issues, right? If you take my color measurement course, you'll learn about geometry issues. So these instruments, this one and the i1 Pro, are 45-0 bidirectional instruments, which is probably what you want for traditional like copy stand type photography. If that's your camera geometry, then this geometry of the instrument is right to use, because the idea is you want those two things to correlate with each other kind of optically, right? You have two light sources on a copy stand coming in like this, and you got your camera at the top. This instrument works exactly the same way. There's light sources coming in at 45 degrees, and then the detection is at the normal angle, just like your camera would be at the normal angle. So 45-0 instrument, definitely what you want to go with. A variety of software that's available for these. Mostly you just work with your instrument manufacturer for that if you're going to do it, or you just get the data from me. And it's pretty simple to take these measurements. You notice there's a little aperture right there, about 3 millimeters in diameter or so. And you just put that on the hole, put the hole over the sample that you want to measure. I push this down, it makes a little beep, and the measurement goes off to the computer. And it's really as simple as that, with the caveat that you do want to be careful when you're near the edges, because I have about a 3 millimeter thick piece of aluminum here, and it's not too obvious in the camera right now, but my instrument is no longer really sitting perpendicular. You can see it moving a little bit when I make it level like that. So you do want to be careful on the edges to keep the instrument out here. And then I'm not going to do that to this because I want to be nice to these patches too, because yes, these are robust, but that doesn't mean you can take a screwdriver to them. Okay. And so out here too, I may cause some damage. So I would put a piece of thin, maybe non-woven cloth or even a tissue or something would be fine. And I would put that out there to make those measurements. But okay, I can do this, but you can't because I'm a professional. So anyway, that's really all there is. One thing to be concerned with is just, believe it or not, is just the order that you take these measurements, because basic color input is expecting row major data. So that means you go across the rows here. So you go A0 to A0 to M0, A1 to M1, that sort of thing. Because if you do that wrong, and basic color, and now assuming the transpose of that, obviously you get really, really bad profiles. So you don't want to do that. And yes, I have experienced that. So that was one thing I've done in terms of back to software and the format going out. I do just routinely export column major and row major data just because it's easy, and it just keeps it the most flexible for as many customers as we may run into.
Excellent.
Okay.
And I think that process as well is something that obviously takes time. So
Yeah.
having you do that for a client is enormously time and effort saving. It's also not it's not as straightforward as just point and click, so to speak. There is a little bit more to it than that, and so there's also the experience, of course, that you have and that Avian has, of decades of doing just this for a variety of industries. That's really beneficial to have. And I think that in combination with the whole, idea of this target being something that has that longevity, that effectively you measure it once and you never have to measure it again, because it's cleanable, because it's robust in that manner, is something that offsets the cost savings in the long term as well. If I have to get an individual color checker and update it every time something goes slightly off, just because the color checker is a less expensive target per item, each time that I have to throw it away and that I have to remeasure it and that I have to, go through that over time, not only the cost of the target, but as you so aptly pointed out, the labor of just dealing with that and taking time away with technicians and trained folks that could be imaging, is a huge resource intensive.
Even just the unknown, where you could have damaged that target and changed its color slightly and maybe not even realize that. And so now you keep proceeding with your measurements or with your imaging and your profile that you made back when that target was undamaged, when that measurement was made when the target was undamaged, and now you're imaging that again, but yet now the reflectance values have changed. So the color values have changed.
Absolutely. So I think that kind of summarizes the target very well. Are there any kind of closing things you'd like to say about the target or about Avian or just to the viewers in general?
Well, let's see. One of the things, well, as you said, you used the word before, agile, right? And I like that word. That's actually in the first sentence of the description of my company on my webpage. That's what we are. We are a small, agile company. We can react. We can get things done. One of the things I've already done with this is I've added some custom patches for researchers at RIT who had a specific need and understood enough to ask for specific colors, and they gave me paint, and then I modified a target and gave them that customized target. So that's something that I think we'll definitely be looking into in the future for how to do that and how to get customers knowledgeable enough to make those requests. But I think that's someplace that we definitely see the NGT going in the future. is targeting maybe even, well, probably not different than cultural heritage, but even within cultural heritage, we can imagine there being some color schemes that would be more useful than others, depending on where you are in that world. Um, and that's probably about all I have. I think we've covered most everything that I want to cover.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Dave, for joining us today. You'll be able to view this on a variety of different platforms. You can check out more about the NGT on our website. We'll also link over to Dave's website as well. And stay tuned for other events. Dave, you're going to be joining us at the roundtable later this year, and we're very much looking forward to that. So once again, thank you, and have an excellent day, everyone.
Okay, thanks very much, Arnab.